Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. It is 12:01, and we'll just wait about a minute or two here just to make sure we got everyone in here. Thanks, guys. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, and welcome to the Fall 2021 Roadway Watercourse Crossing webinar series, presented by the Alberta Watercourse Crossing Collaborative and sponsored by the Alberta Conservation Association. My name is Matthew Huberto, and I'll be your host throughout this webinar series. The Alberta Watercourse Crossing Collaborative is a non-for-profit organization whose primary objective is to restore lost and damaged fish habitat from poorly installed and maintained watercourse crossings. We achieve this objective through education and information transfer from subject matter experts to practitioners. This webinar series was created to help achieve those objectives by discussing important topics in an easily accessible format. All these webinars are recorded and will be made available on AWC3's website. After today's presentation, there will be a question and answer period. Questions can be asked by using the webinar toolbar located on the right side of your screen, which will allow you to type in questions. Questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Today's presentation is about the Water and Fisheries Compliance Program and will be presented by Angela Bowditch from the AER. Angela has been with the Alberta Energy Regulator for 5 years and has been in the position of Senior Inspector for Water and Fisheries for the last year and is located in Grand Prairie. She is a professional biologist who has worked as a consultant for the oil and gas industry and for us as Alberta Parks as a land use officer. Without further ado, here's
Good afternoon. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. My name is Angela Bowditch, and I'm the Senior Inspector for Water and Fisheries. This is me back in my consulting days with a lovely bull trout down on the Wapiti doing a radio tagging program. Like Matthew said, I've been with the AER for 5 years and in this position for 1 year. Thank you so much for your time in attending today. I'll start out with a little bit of the history of the Alberta Energy Regulator, and then my primary focus today is going to be on how the AER comes to decide on priorities, in particular for the Water and Fisheries program. So the Alberta Regulator has been around since 2013. In 2013, the Responsible Energy Development Act, REDA, was created, which changed us from the ERCB over to the AER, and I'll try to make sure I give all of the acronyms. So the Energy Resources Conservation Board, and before that the EUB, the Alberta Energy and Utilities Board. The primary focus of this was to make sure that we were streamlining things for industry. So oil and gas would have to go to multiple regulators, using multiple programs, and the hope was in designing the AER, we would have a one-stop shop for industry, so that we took over functions related to public lands, water, and the environment. We still look to Alberta Environment and Parks, AEP, who creates the policy, and then we come up with the rules to enforce. So the AER is a quasi branch of the government. We take our direction from the government of Alberta. The Alberta Energy Regulator looks over oil, gas, coal, and possibly more sectors to come. There's talks going about things like geothermal and some other sectors. We look after things from cradle to grave. So we deal with other regulators still, and you may still have to deal with regulators federally and provincially, such as Alberta Environment and Parks, Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries and Oceans. The AER's main mandate is to ensure the safe, efficient, orderly, and environmentally responsible development of oil sands, natural gas, and coal resources over their entire life cycle, right from cradle to grave. This includes allocating and conserving water resources, managing public lands, and protecting the environment while providing economic benefit for all Albertans. This presentation is going to build on two presentations that have been given in the past and can be found as recordings on the AWC3 website. Owen Cook gave an excellent presentation on compliance generally last year, and Mike Hunka last week talked about legislation directly regarding fisheries. So both of those are worth looking up if you didn't get a chance to see them. So like I said, the government of Alberta provides the policy, and then we come up with the rules and directives to enforce the policy. So the AER conducts inspections, audits, and performance reviews to ensure that our rules are followed. There are two acts governing watercourses: the Water Act, under that the Code of Practice and Water Ministerial Regulation, and the Public Lands Act, Access to Bed and Shore. Like I said, Mike Hunka went into those more specifically last week, but I just wanted to note that the Water Ministerial Regulation does have some exemptions that are worth looking at. An example would be the removal of beaver dam from a water body. So as long as it's the person removing the beaver dam owns or occupies the land adjacent to the water body where the beaver dam is located or has been authorized to do so by that person, they don't need to follow the Code of Practice, or they don't need to get permission. So there are some a list of exemptions included in the Water Ministerial Regulation. The AER follows the integrated compliance assurance approach for their compliance programs. So number one is setting the requirements, then education, then prevention and enforcement. It's a continuum. Sometimes things are more applicable than others, and sometimes there may be a chain of events if the company that we're dealing with isn't responding, but we definitely use this whole scale. The idea is that the AER can't be everywhere at once, and we can't look at every watercourse crossing every year, so we need to do a risk-based approach, and this is the continuum that we use to make sure that we're focusing in the right places. So with education, the goal is to promote compliance. Our goal is to change behavior. So if we can go out and have discussions with a company or a contractor or a consultant, that's going to go a lot further than just dealing with one specific incident. We do this in a number of ways. It might be during an inspection, it might be through seminars, calibration sessions, it might be education to both our own inspectors and the industry, might be through bulletins, websites, and other forms of engagement. Prevention is verifying compliance. So in this case, we identify and address potential problems before they cause environmental damage. We ensure the development and implementation of continuous improvement approaches. We verify compliance with regulatory requirements. So we'd much rather be dealing in this side of the continuum, getting to things before they happen and before the damage is done. Enforcement is compelling compliance. So something has already happened that's made us go out to site. Maybe we've found something during inspection or somebody has called in a complaint. This is our regulatory backstop. Our goal is to provide firm, fair enforcement of the legislation. Incidents may be found during the inspection or reported by the company or other members of the public or another company or anybody who may have encountered it. For further follow-up, we may send the incident over to our major investigations team to initiate an investigation, which could result in a fine, creative sentencing, warning letters, administrative penalties, orders, and prosecutions. Something new for us as inspectors this year is when we go out, and if we find a non-compliance, we need to decide if it's a typical non-compliance or a non-typical non-compliance. So in that case, a typical would mean that it's something that's administrative, it's easily remedied or educated, no concern for immediate adverse effect. If something is non-typical, that means it has a bigger effect. It's an immediate adverse effect, requires a plan to address the issues, requires extensive education, supervision, and we're constantly assessing our compliance rates, inspection methods to make sure we're spending time on the right risks and spotting trends before we get too far down that road. Every year we set our water and fisheries program priorities. Things that we have focused on this year and in the past include things like surface water diversions. So long-term diversions or temporary diversion licenses. The water may be used for all sorts of purposes, such as hydraulic fracture. Groundwater diversions, again, groundwater diversions may be long-term licenses or temporary diversion licenses. We deal with codes of practice for water diversions, such as hydrostatic testing of pipelines. Codes of practice for activities might include watercourse crossing notifications, telecommunication and pipeline crossing notifications, or a code of practice for outfall structures. This has been one of our primary focuses for the last year. One of our goals in the Water and Fisheries program is to align with the Government of Alberta's priorities and to make sure that companies are spending their time and their money in the right place to get the biggest bang for their buck. So we have been looking at codes of practice notifications for things like culverts and bridges to go out and make sure that companies are completing projects that we're happy with as well. We don't want a company to go out and do 100 culvert replacements and at the end of the day find out that they're not fish passable and they're contributing to erosion. Approvals are things like pipeline armoring or bed hardening. It might be fish bearing or not fish bearing approvals. And approvals for wetland disturbance, and approvals after an emergency phase. So things like flooding, dewatering, unexpected exposure of a groundwater aquifer. Internal referrals are things that come from another group in the AER. They may come from the authorizations group, it may come from the pipeline group, things that involve water that they want us to have a look at. And then watercourse crossings is where I'll be spending the majority of my time elaborating. One thing to note is we're not alone as inspectors working on water and fisheries. Many of our inspectors have many practices that they look after, and we also rely on fish biologists, hydrologists, hydrogeologists, authorizations, and our audit team. We all work together for the same purpose. Our watercourse crossing program in particular has been an evolving thing. So the federal government realized that fish populations were declining and something needed to be done with it. So the government of Alberta, provincially, looked at watercourse crossings and has worked very hard to come up with a plan rather than being mandated by the federal government on how to fix our declining fish populations. The GOA has been working on coming up with a program to improve those populations. And one of the contributing factors has been watercourse crossings. Whether it's oil and gas or forestry, there's many different types of watercourse crossings in the province, and it's been identified as a major contributing factor to declining fish populations. So at the AAR, to align with the GOA program, we've been working with both member and non-member companies to make watercourse crossings a large targeted program for our inspectors. So Mike talked quite a bit about our watercourse crossing tool that we use to identify crossings that we should be having a look at, but I wanted to highlight a few other things as well. So this year, our inspectors changed to using the ABWCI app, the Alberta Watercourse Crossing Inventory. This app is free. And there's been several presentations about it if you want more information, and the Government of Alberta website is a great resource as well. So this year we focused on inspecting crossings with this app. And the app is great because it really focuses on two key things. It focuses on erosion and it focuses on fish passage. It doesn't worry about some of the biological factors. It just identifies whether that crossing has an issue and what it's related to. So in order to decide where we're going to inspect watercourse crossings, we can't inspect all 40,000 crossings every year. We need to decide what our priorities are. So for this last year, we've placed our priority on high priority watersheds as set out by the Alberta government, Strala Order 2 or above, and non-member companies. So in 2015, we worked with AEP to start educating companies about watercourse crossings. And at that time, and throughout for the last 6 years, companies could decide whether they wanted to become a member of the Watercourse Crossing Directive. If they did decide to become a member, they had a few years to come up with a list of watercourse crossings and identified which needed to be remediated, and through the directive decide which would be the priority. So again, making sure that we're getting the biggest bang for the buck, that companies are fixing those watercourse crossings in the highest priority watersheds that will do the greatest good. We still continue to look at erosion. So if we happened upon a crossing that had an erosion problem, whether they were a member or a non-member, that's an immediate concern, and the companies need to fix that immediately. So as a voluntary member company, companies need to submit their data as of November 30th of this year, and as of next year, we're still going to place priority on higher priority watersheds, Strala Order 2 or above, non-member companies, but we will be doing, we're not sure what we'll call them yet, but a ground truthing or an audit of member crossing information that was submitted for this year. There's some exciting work right now going on at AEP, where they're going to be able to take that data that's submitted and put it on a map for us, so that our fish biologists reviewing the data that's submitted by member companies will be able to see if people are following the priorities created, and to look at things like how many kilometers of watershed are being opened, how many crossings have been remediated through the year. So it's going to be very exciting to be able to look at this provincially and see if we're moving the needle. I wanted to give an example of non-compliance to go through our process. So in this case, if one of our inspectors is out and they come across a culvert like this, they pull out their ABWCI app and they enter an inspection. So in this case, it might catch an eye because it's a hanging culvert. So the inspector will do the inspection out in the field, and they will come home and they will enter it into our program called FIS, the Field Inspection System, notifying the company of the non-compliance. At that point, the company will receive a notification through DDS, the Digital Data Submission. The inspector will consider whether they want to move it over to our major investigations team. So we call that process triaging. The company will receive information such as what the non-compliance was, what the expected action is, and what timeline we expect the action to be. So for something like this culvert, we would want them to tell us what their timeline is going to be for remediation and show us their plan for remediating that culvert. So once they produce that plan, they will send it over to us for approval. The AER is not generally prescriptive. We don't tell the company how to fix things. We let the company come up with a plan that's defensible and present it to us. The other key part in the education piece is ensuring it won't happen again. So not only is the company trying to address that particular non-compliance, but in particular, they're looking at the bigger picture of ensuring that it will not happen again. Depending on the scale of events, how big a non-compliance it is, the work would be completed at that point, and then either re-inspected or evidence would be sent over to the AER so that we could close out that file. One of the things I wanted to note, especially for consultants in industry that might be listening in, we are always open to conversation. So whether you're talking to myself or one of the fish biologists, it's a great time to talk about the client talk about the project before any money is spent. So for example, we had a company that had a hanging culvert, and they didn't want to replace the culvert. Instead, they wanted to build up the outlet with rock. We're more than open to having conversations to make sure, again, that money and time is being spent in the right places. So if you're doing a project that's out of the ordinary or asking for something like my example, where the company wanted to do something different than just replacing the culvert, talk to us early in the project and make sure that whoever is doing the report for you or the work for you is really building the story for us, because we can't always be out on site and our fish biologists can't always go to site. So make sure there's great pictures, to make sure that you're defending what you're asking for. So is there fish passage issues? Is there the blockages? Is there a reason that we shouldn't be worrying about fish passage? Is there no way that a fish could get up here? Is it just erosion concerns that we're worried about? So that's really important, that the reports we get aren't just generic, typical reports, that they're actually telling the story and explaining what you want to do in the project. All right, that's all I have. I'm going to have Cam Ames and Paul Harrington join me for the question and answer period. If anybody has any questions, we would love to hear them.
Perfect. Thank you for that presentation, Angela. And just a reminder, if you have any questions, you can type them in using the GoToWebinar toolbar on the right side of your screen. So our first question is, how does the AER decide where and when to conduct field audits of crossings, and also who will be audited? Or what will be audited, sorry.
So we're just ending the current field season. And we're going to have that new data coming in by November 30th. A few companies have already started to share their data. Next year, the audits will be in particular focused on member companies that have submitted data. And we're still working on deciding, with input from the government of Alberta, what percentage we'll be auditing, who will be auditing, and what our focus will be. So to be announced.
Perfect. Our next question is, what are the high priority watersheds? In the shape files accessible to the public, it doesn't indicate which are the high priority watersheds.
The GOA has the shape file. So if anybody is looking for that information, Wendy Harrison would be your best contact if it's not showing up properly. Paul, any comments?
No, as mentioned, the GOA has that list, and it's basically it's numbered and it's color coded, and basically the top of the list is the highest priority. I think Mike Hunke indicated last week that may change a little bit, but generally those water bodies listed, or those watersheds, will be fairly accurate. They might be tweaked a little bit, back and forth between, maybe fifth or sixth place kind of thing, but generally that list should be fairly permanent and of use.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. Our next question is, what happens to crossings that you find that are high risk, but the road owner is not able to financially deal with the problem? Is there any mechanism or program that could work with the owner to get the crossing fixed?
Cam, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can. That's a good question. I'm not aware of any mechanism to assist in that case. I mean, through the traditional use of our enforcement tools such as orders and that type of stuff. That would likely be the way that we would leverage a company to take action. I'm not aware of any cases where we have run into that situation. Angela or Paul, I don't know if you guys are aware of anything like that, but no, otherwise we would just continue using the compliance system that the AER has, which again may include issuing an order if needed.
Yeah, the only other thing I've seen, and I don't know if the company was successful, they were trying to see if they could use some federal remediation money that the feds have put forward for cleanup of old wells, etc., in Alberta. And I think he was trying to pursue to see if he could get some of the crossings for the site that he applied for to be cleaned up as well. As I mentioned, I don't know if he's successful in that, but that's the only other kind of funding outside your own means that I could think of.
And the Orphan Well Association would take over the care of that crossing if the company was no longer financially viable.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. Our next question is the list of member companies publicly available?
Good question. Yeah, we have the list for our own staff, just to ensure that we're keeping with the intent of the directive and knowing who's members and non-members, and to develop our inspection program accordingly. But I think we had it on our AER website, but unfortunately that information changes quite frequently, so it's hard to have that on our website and keep it up to date. So I would suggest just emailing Angela. You got her email there, and we can always provide that to make sure it's timely.
Perfect. Thank you, Paul. Next question is, what is the timeline to get through the process of inspection, reporting non-compliance, producing the plan, and completing the work? Is this set by the AER or by the company? And do you follow up with the work before closing the file?
Yes, absolutely. Each individual case is very specific. So if it's something simple like changing out a kickboard on a bridge, we might give a much tighter timeline compared to having to replace multiple culverts in a very large water course where there might be a restricted activity period timing. So I guess the quick answer is that it depends, as Cam likes to say. But every situation is different. And we do follow up on the work. That's part of closing out the file. Sometimes it's in person and sometimes it's not. Cam, Paul, anything to add?
Yeah, and just to be honest, it's, Water Act files can take more time than a typical, I guess, oil and gas non-compliant file. But you're right. We want to see that action plan. We want to see that you're taking the appropriate steps to address it. You're, as a proponent, as the crossing owner, are going to provide those details of what needs to occur for it to be fixed, when you plan on doing those works, and then going, if it meets the code of practice, ensuring that you meet those requirements, i.e. if you have to have a quace report, etc. So, and as Angela mentioned before, the Water Act is not always as easy as some other pieces of legislation to follow, and there's timing requirements for restricted activity periods, etc. So we appreciate those difficulties, and we're pretty open to working with companies to make sure that they do come into compliance. And as all non-compliances, yeah, we need to confirm as inspectors that those compliance issues have been addressed. And a lot of times, maybe not always, but a lot of times we will conduct a final inspection to be able to ensure those compliance issues have been addressed.
Perfect. Our next question is, how are proposed watercourse crossings approved in the case of work within or near critical habitat for SARA-listed fish?
So we work with multiple agencies. So industry will have to have the project approved by both Fisheries and Oceans, as well as submitting that plan. So if it's a case of the company has identified it themselves and they've submitted a code of practice, they will have to have the federal approval for everything else. If it's a project that's unusual, our fish biologists can review it. Cam, Paul, anything to add?
Nothing from me. No, I would echo the same as what Angela said, and have definitely experienced where there's been some, say, challenges from either the DFO side or the AER side on getting a project completed, but it is important that you are covering off both of those sides.
Yeah, and just a note too that obviously we have very good communication with GOA and with DFO, etc. So yeah, we do talk, and if it's something that's a special project like that actually needs more firepower, or the different agencies need to get together and discuss, then we will definitely do that.
All right, next question. Some areas are affected by beaver activity, which could affect the water crossing. What is the AER expecting in regards to beaver management?
So I'll start. Our main goal is that fish passage and erosion concerns are controlled. That means that owners of crossings need to be inspecting their crossings regularly, and in some cases that will necessitate beaver control, whether it's clearing out the culvert because they've dammed it up, or whether it's actually going further to control the beavers that are causing the issues. Cam, Paul, anything to add there?
Yeah, I can maybe just jump in and add, you know, we do consider beaver activity natural on the landscape. So I would maybe look at it from two different points of view. One, that beavers are affecting the actual water crossing itself, such as plugging up culverts, versus beaver activity, say where a beaver has constructed a dam, you know, immediately upstream or downstream. I know we have received questions in the past about, you know, why do we need to fix this crossing if there's a beaver dam immediately upstream? The fact is beaver dams can be temporary on the landscape, so we would still expect companies to be, you know, having and maintaining a proper watercourse crossing installation. But otherwise, you know, the purpose or our expectation would be the proper management of that watercourse crossing. Any additional management of beaver activity would likely have to do with, you know, risks or impacts to the water crossing itself.
Yeah, and the code of practice also indicates that crossings have to be monitored for life of that crossing. So, you know, if crossing is a culvert, for instance, that's a man-made structure, obviously. And even though beaver activity is natural, man has placed an object there that the beaver can easily plug off, and so it is your responsibility to ensure those flows occur across that crossing. The Water Act also indicates that natural flows must exist, and anything that stops flow or redirects it or the rate, etc., that's an activity under the legislation and needs to be managed. So and then if we want to get into structures like beaver deceivers, which some people call them, just a word of caution. DFO actually does have requirements indicating that your structure needs to be able to, or the design of this structure has to show that it'll still allow fish passage. So as inspectors, we see a lot of different structures, different types of things trying to keep beavers out of the culverts. Some are more successful than others, but they're hard to manage. Beavers are very active. They're very they respond very quickly to companies pulling the debris out, etc. Once they feel or see that water moving, they act quickly. So we understand it's always in a struggle, but at the same time, proponents need to be, crossing owners need to be monitoring and managing those structures to ensure that flow is maintained and fish passage is maintained. I think we noted when we did a lot of the work up in the boreal, you know, with the low velocities of water flow up there, it's not so much a hanging culvert issue in the boreal for fish passage, it's more of a blockage. So we spent quite a bit of time during that project looking at the boreal inspection program, trying to assess that. So I think there's going to be more work done between the regulators on how to address beaver activity and the uses of beaver deceivers. But right now it comes down to, you need to be monitoring. If you have blockages, you need to open those up, allow the water to flow, and just keep in mind that you need to be able to defend that structure if DFO asks how you're maintaining fish passage as per the design.
Thank you, Paul. Our next question, does AER's watercourse crossing directive set cumulative limits on crossings, or do they only look at individual projects on a case-by-case basis without considering the wider and total number of crossings?
Mike Hunk had talked a little bit in his presentation last week about the area-based work idea, where if a company wants to submit projects in a grouping, we're more than willing to accept that as long as they're in the same watershed. And the program that the Alberta Environment and Parks is working on will make it a lot easier to identify all members that have crossings, non-members that have crossings in a particular watershed. So I guess not quite understanding the question.
Well,
point.
yeah, and I think that's kind of the intent of the directive, is to take that more cumulative effects and using those tools that we have to determine, you know, how many crossings are on the landscape, how many crossings are a potential issue, and that kind of speaks to what the cumulative effects are from the infrastructure that's being put on the ground historically. And you know, I guess one way to avoid that is under the Public Lands Act, how we expect infrastructure being, you know, LOCs, roads going in, that they try to use existing linear disturbance as much as possible, try to avoid any new roads, etc.
All right, thank you. Our next question is, how does a company formally become a member company? Do we email or contact yourself? And what is the driver to being a member versus non-member company?
So if a company wants more information, they can email me at this address and I can provide information. We used to send out a package. You might hear some people refer to the information package. The information was changing so quickly that we refer people back to AEP's website about the membership directive. In the beginning, the main driver to get people to sign on as voluntary members was that we would not be focusing on member companies' crossings. At this point, that's less of an incentive, but at the same time, water is important to Albertans. It's the top of the list for many people living in this province. So even for a company to be able to say that they are participating voluntarily in this directive, that buys huge social license. One of the questions today was focused on where can we find this member list. So people are interested that companies are doing the right thing, and whether a company is a member or not a member, they still need to be doing the same thing, ensuring that their crossings are not adding to erosion and that they are fish passable. Cam or Paul, anything to add?
Yeah, another benefit that was identified very early on was the ability for a member company to complete an assessment of all of their crossings and then prioritize based on risk. The alternative, of course, you know, with non-members, was going back to the traditional way of, you know, receiving an inspection from the AER and then being required to fix that crossing within a prescribed timeline. So there just offers a little bit more flexibility when it comes to, you know, taking a little bit more time to, number one, inventory all of your crossings. Number two, prioritize them. And that way you can start to factor in budgets and that type of stuff rather than just a surprise email saying, hey, this site's been inspected by the AER and requires some work to, you know, come back into compliance.
Yeah, and one other point too is the efficiencies and the cost effectiveness. Like kind of like Cam said, if you're chasing non-compliances all over the province, it's pretty hard to have a game plan and manage your finances for that. Whereas if you're a member, you've identified your highest risk crossings in a certain location. You speak with us and indicate that, yeah, this is where we want to focus our intentions this year for remediation. Then, you know, we want to make sure, and as Mike Hunk always says, we want to make sure the money's going to the best place, right? So, and then the other point of the directive too, the hope is that crossing owners will work together, right? They'll have basically a crossing owner partnership where they'll identify, multiple companies can identify high risk crossings in a certain area, and maybe they can pool their resources and even their application to address those.
Perfect. And I have a related question here. I believe you guys may have partly answered it. How are non-members held accountable for non-compliant watercourse crossings?
Yes, so as we mentioned, that has been our priority focus for this past season, is looking for non-member crossings that are straw order 2 or above and in high priority watersheds. So we create an inspection program, and then we may also find some additional sites to inspect as the field season goes on when we're out and about on the landscape. So quite often the non-members are one-offs, like Paul was speaking about.
Perfect. Thank you, Angela. Our next question is, are inspection audits only complaint driven, or can they occur at random unannounced site visits?
So our main watercourse crossing inspections are planned. They're not complaint based, and our audits of next year will again be based on the data that we're receiving from companies. If we do receive complaints, absolutely we will go out and inspect those, but the majority of our watercourse crossing inspections are planned and not based on incidents that happen. Paul, anything to add?
Yeah, the general terminology we use is, so when we're looking at inspections of non-member companies, and we should include codes of practice, notifications, those are also on the table for us to inspect, no matter if it's membered or non-membered, because we want to make sure that construction techniques and the code of practice is being followed. But and then the audits is, as we've mentioned, again, we're not really sure on the name we're going to use, but generally the audits will be for the membered companies, for the data that they've submitted. I'm assuming it'll be a low percentage of the crossings that they submit, but we'll go out and just basically check to see if our inspections are providing the same information as the company's inspection results. So yeah, we'll have audits as of next year, and then right now we're doing the proactive inspections as part of a risk program, and then the reactive type of inspections are the complaints as mentioned.
Perfect. Next question, is the ABWCI app only applicable to AER regulated industries, or are all proponents using it? And or will it be implementable to use in DRAS on the AEP side?
So at this point, the app is open to anyone who wants to use it. And we aligned with the AEP because their regulators were using it this last season as well. So both of us tried it out, and it seemed to be fairly successful. Paul, anything?
Yeah, as Angela mentioned, the app is for anybody, citizen science, anybody that wants to, if you're out hiking, you want to do an inspection on a crossing, you can. There's some special interest groups that are out using it as well because they've deemed that this is important to them and they want to get out and understand the status of these crossings, and they're using the app. The app is just a really easy tool to provide the regulators a snapshot of the condition of that crossing. And it really is important that good pictures are taken, and you do have some knowledge, some background in inspecting crossings. Some service providers, some companies may use their own software that they've developed, which occurs. But at the end of the day, as long as that data that's required from the app can be provided to the regulators to update that inventory, that's the big requirement. So for us as inspectors, we may go into more depth in our inspection when we're looking at these crossings, but the app is just a real quick, easy way for us to conduct our inspections and also provide GOA that much needed inventory data of what's going on in the province.
Perfect. And our final question, if a member company has identified some work required, for example, a culvert washout in a low priority watershed, aside from getting the QACE report completed, DFO notification, and submitting the COPs in one stop to do the repair, are there any further reporting requirements to the AER?
If that company is a member company, we would expect that that is included in their data submission. And we require any non-compliances to be reported. Paul, any other additional requirements? I mean, every project is specific. It's up to industry to know what they need to apply for. I've seen cases where sometimes navigable waters needs to be applied to because they're going to be affecting navigation on the watercourse.
Yeah, and it's probably important to, like, I guess if it's a compliance file, you're going to have the requirements of whatever the inspector is requesting information of. So if it's an action plan or follow-up, etc., obviously you want to make sure that you're meeting those requirements as per what the inspector's direction is. If this was a blowout, like say the 2013 floods where we had lots of this go on in the province, the code of practice does have an emergency clause. It allows the proponent to address, you know, say this is a washout and there's people stuck on the other side of the road, there's a hamlet or something on the other side of the road and there's no way getting out. If it truly is an emergency, and we assess that because we do get different COP emergency notifications come in, and an inspector will assess, is this truly an emergency? And if it is, the proponent can commence the works as long as they follow section 6 of the COP, basically going through notifying us immediately, you know, of the concern of what's going on, and then you're going to be responsible in providing basically the information that you would upfront on a COP notification, but you're going to have to provide it on the back end, showing us that you met the conditions of COP and that you did it properly, and this crossing is not going to be an issue in the future.
Thank you. It looks like that was the last of our questions. So I want to thank you, Angela, Paul, and Cam, for today's presentation, and to all those who have joined today. Please join us again Thursday, November 4th for our next webinar presented by Brandon Allen from the Alberta Biodiversity Monitoring Institute on stream connectivity models. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks again to Angela, Cam, and Paul. Have a great day, everyone.